Good evening, everyone. I call the meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order. It's 6:31. With me, I have Councilor Nelson Roman, I'm Councilor Linda Bacon, and Councilor David Bartley. In the chambers, we also have Councilor Sullivan and Councilors Valentin. Councilor McGivern's somewhere around. I've seen him earlier, so he'll be in shortly. So I will consider I properly introduced him. Okay, so tonight we do not have minutes.
To table number one, item number one.
Is there a second?
I don't think we have minutes, so.
We'll just leave them on the table.
No. So just.
Motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up which
Item two.
Item two and open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So item 2 is a public hearing for a special permit application from Boston Bud Factory for a registered marijuana retail establishment and a registered marijuana manufacturing establishment at 73 Sargeant Street, Holyoke, Mass., map 028, block 07, parcel 013. If the applicant would like to come up to the microphone, introduce yourselves, give us your addresses, and run down your application, where you stand. Do you still have it?
I do.
Where you stand relative to the variance and the notices that went out to the various departments relative to your application, that would be great. Pull that button forth so that it's...
Is that better?
That's better.
Carlos Sarno, 47 Willowbrook, Long Meadow.
And Frank, can you tell me your last name again? I'm sorry.
Dailey, D-A-I-L-E-Y.
Okay, thank you. So you filed your application with the city, and we're in the public hearing process. Timely, you noted on your application that you've applied for a certain variance. And within the application, the city clerk sent notices out to the various departments within the city. And just so you know, the committee just today received a 3-page correspondence relative to your application. Okay. So the committee has not had an opportunity, but I see Marcos here. Maybe he will be able to speak to that during the public hearing and help us out. So I would just let you run down your application and your project from the top, if you would.
Sure. We're looking to put a retail retail store at 73 Sargent Street, which is at the building at the corner of Sargent and Race. So it will be a small 500 square foot retail store with 2 to 3 point of sale stations. In the back, there's a small room, which is, I believe, 10 by 20, 15 by 20, where we will do some product development to start developing our own product line, and that would be the RMRE part, the manufacturing side of things. So we've gone through the security plan, had that approved by the chief of police. We're in the process of scheduling a walkthrough with Captain Moriarty to go through any concerns they may have and to ask some questions we had.
Okay. Have they sent in an approval of your security plan at this point?
There's a letter from the chief of police and their approval of our security plan, yes. We did that before. That was the first step we did.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure I had it here, and we do. Thank you.
We have 2 applications currently in with the state under review, one for retail store and one for manufacturing. We've gone through the background check phase. They're reviewing our operating procedures and everything now. So we hope to have a complete application with the state sometime in November or December.
Okay. Now, at your site, do you plan on having on-site consumption at all?
Absolutely not.
And do you have any plans to do deliveries to individuals or homes or anything of that sort?
Absolutely not.
And would you be comfortable having that stipulated in the conditions of the special permit, that those not happen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else in your project that you want the committee to be aware of in the overview?
No, just that the two owners are local. We don't have consultants or lawyers here representing us. It's the two owners. We are the only owners of Boston Bud Factory. Carlo currently operates Brian Brew on Commercial Street in Springfield, in Holyoke. Potbelly's also in Springfield. So I currently run a manufacturing operation in East Long Meadow. So we're local guys. We've volunteered in the community. We've been at the community events doing what we can. We've talked to Nelson about the Verde Fund, hiring local, doing some of our hiring through Nueva Esperanza.
I did see you stipulated a number of things in the application.
So we sponsor a softball team in Holyoke.
We've done this a couple of times. That's static. We comment on the site plans that we receive and provide feedback on what we see as appropriate or missing or whatnot to provide the committee with guidance in your decision making.
We appreciate that.
So the letter essentially boils down to the following points. There's a lot lacking for us to make a comment on in terms of specifics. So, for example, there's no photometric plan, so we can't really comment on the appropriateness of lighting. We don't fully understand how the findings on traffic impact are arrived at, right? So they state that they would not have an impact on abutting businesses. So some of the questions are geared towards that, just understanding how they arrived to that conclusion. As you know, in other proposals, we would have like traffic numbers or estimates based off of engineering numbers. That doesn't mean that they have to do traffic counts, but there are standard numbers that can be used for that. That is not provided here. Just making a note that there is no parking on the site. Of course, it's a reuse of a building, but that the parking as proposed here will require. Their proposed solution would require an additional step by the City Council, which is they're proposing that there be 30-minute parking and on 4 parking spots in front of their business. It's not clear to us how refuse would be managed, secured, and tipped out of the site. We understand that it is from the back side of the building, but it's just making it clear how that turn would happen. Would the refuse be taken out of the alleyway? You know, what kind of equipment would be able to come in and tip that refuse to be taken out.
So if you,
Sure.
Is that just typically a company that would do that, a waste hauling company?
Yeah, usually that's a waste hauling company, right? And so we want to make sure that when someone represents, this is where our waste is going to be, that there aren't any logistical impediments to that then, trash always ends up where you don't plan it to be. Or it becomes a security issue if someone thinks that they can go into the wrong place. So that's usually why we're concerned about refuse when we ask about it in the plans. It's not completely clear to us, and we're not sure if to the police department, if the security around the tenant separation has been resolved or not. So I know they have a letter approving their plan from the police department. They did that before submitting that to us. We had a question about separation of uses inside the building, and by the applicant's latest response, it was something that was under discussion with Captain Moriarty, who does the review for the police department. So
Which question is that?
I just saw it.
Okay, so 13, number 13. Okay, so the point is,
They're leasing a portion of the first floor of the building. And it's been a while since I personally saw the plans, but I believe it was some sort of fencing inside the facility. So there's a question of the appropriateness of the fencing to separate that use from other uses where it could be a security issue. So by the applicant's response to question 13, or actually 14, it's an ongoing discussion with Captain Moriarty of the Holyoke Police Department. So that may be something to ask them about. I unfortunately don't have more information on it. The last thing that I would point out is...
Excuse me, I just want to point out, it's probably more appropriately to 14, these specific issues that you were raised about the separation, not
Correct.
13.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
That there are several other smaller areas where we just cannot comment on appropriately because of lack of detail. So when they're saying they're going to put planters and they show planters, we don't know how wide they are, whether it's impeding the progress of pedestrians or not. I'm not saying this to be negative, just we don't have enough information on the site plan to understand whether the parking spaces as depicted, if they're the right size, the planters, the canopy, the lighting, there's just lacking information.
So, just to refresh my memory, with the other applications that we have done for the nature of these questions, not the co-tenancy, because we didn't have that
Sure.
issue in the other ones, but for some of the other details, had they provided you, the other applicants, had they provided you with a greater level of detail at this point in the process?
Yes.
Okay. And this is just the first public hearing on this application at this point anyway. Counselor Lisi?
And I think that with previous applicants, this response is really a response to the applicants. And in many times, the applicants were able to respond and revise the plans before it even came to council based on the feedback that they were given in this letter.
Right. I'm seeing some of that, but it looks like it's all pretty recent. So,
There have been discussions between the department and not just us, I believe the city engineer, I can't completely speak to that.
Yeah.
So there have been some responses to these questions. Part of the delay in getting it back to you is we want to make sure that we give the most time as possible for the applicant to get back to us.
sure.
So they may be in the process of figuring some of this stuff out.
Sure.
Not sure.
Okay. So that hits the main points?
Yes.
All
I
right.
figured instead of boring you with line
No,
by
no, no.
line.
Right. As long as we get sort of the main things and maybe the applicant can bring us up to date informally before we get in a more written, formal response to some of these tonight.
Those plans are further down the road when we go for building permits, so we're in the design phase now. As far as the planters, the one thing that I want to comment on is the planning department asked us to put the planters on there to spruce up the sidewalk and then made us get a permit for it, which we did. The planter's going to be provided by the city. We're going to just maintain them.
Okay,
So
well,
we're just
so things like that can just get easily
So, and I've
clarified
had
in,
discussions with them to try and go through some of that. We don't have the big fancy plans and the $1 million plans. and the $1 million
some of that, though.
I absolutely agree.
right. Counselor Lisi, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure, so when you're speaking, we need you have you in speaking to the mic. Yeah, and you could lift the mic up if you need to. Yeah, I understand that you don't have, the big fancy planners, but I think that at some point we need a level of detail where we could have the information that we need in order to make a decision on some of these things.
Absolutely, and we agreed to do the photometric plan, so we were looking for engineers and people, so some of this is forthcoming, and still needs to be determined. We've got a quote for the awning. The awning has lights underneath it, but how many lights, it still needs to be determined as far as the final design.
Okay. All I'm looking for is, equity between the different applications and the level of information that's provided so that when we do a look back, we handled our process consistently.
And we did provide drawings of what the site will look like. So in the packet, it shows both architects' renderings of before and after. So we had multiple meetings with the planning department. We had a smaller awning originally. They asked to spruce it up more, so we expanded the awning. So, we're here to work with whatever we have to do. It's just gonna take us a little more time because we don't have the budgets for those fancy plans. We do have plans in there, so we are working with engineers. These aren't plans that I'm just drawing up with crayon. So we have engineers that have done work on the site, they just aren't formally finalized plans yet.
Counselor Roman?
Yes, thank you, gentlemen. I want to thank you guys so much. This is an example of a company that has been really active since you guys first, even pre-applicant, have been getting into the neighborhood, speaking with Carmen and Jerry in the Neighborhood Association. And I apologize, I'm wearing this hat. I don't have hair product. I just got off the plane from Puerto Rico, had to be here. There's a few items on here, so off the plane from Bradley here. But as the ward counselor, I do have some questions. The limo company is right next door to you, and they're always using that sidewalk right behind you to clean their cars, wash their cars. It's a very frequent and busy port. The Lisette Glass is back there, and I know I'm hearing from them, that is, with all due respect to the city, the part of Ray Street that is not done, right, not finished. So I think that the parking is going to be of grave concern to the other business owners. And if you guys could just get a letter, because I know he's the building owner, right? So it's like a win-win for you all. What he's planning on doing with all of those limo trucks when they take them out, they park them out there.
We agreed to line spaces on Ray Street, but we were
I know, but
told-
with regards to the permit parking and stuff, like, and there's those tenants now in the front building. So at Puerta de Esperanza, which is owned by Herb Bazarin, all those tenants use all those, and when there's snowstorms and stuff, I just want to make sure we get the parking right, is all I'm trying to say, gentlemen. So even if you could speak to Herb and his team, they're on Main Street as well, from Puerta de Esperanza, they own that building, just with regards to parking, and just saying, hey, if there's a snowstorm, I think it'd be nice, hey, the tenants could park there, we won't kick them out, because they're right there behind as well. And so those are just the little minor things that, and it's the first public hearing, so like I said, we're going to come back. But for me as the ward counselor, and that alleyway is shot. As a tenant, it was a couple doors down. I'm just really concerned with your dolly draw up. I just know people are walking constantly back there. So just for me, just for your safety, your product safety, everyone's safety, the lighting in that back alleyway is going to be critical to me. And I didn't, I see that you guys have that in your plans. That's going to be really important to protecting the safety of you, the community, the tenants, and the building. And I agree, the chain link fence was the only thing that was a little interesting for me, because I know that's just basically the huge garage for the limos and stuff like that. So like, they're not moving out tomorrow. They're going to still be there. So the chain link fence was really just of concern, just looking at those in the plans. But I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for reaching out to speaking to the neighborhood, going literally door to door to every business organization. I mean, even the Greek church across the street, I heard you guys went there as well. So I thank you guys. Yeah,
trying to go to business owners as well.
you guys are doing that, and I thank you for that, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Counselor, if you could, the question was raised about the dumpster and the hauling company that would be removing the debris, how they would access it in and out. Is that going onto that alley that Counselor Roman is referring to?
We have two options there. One is that part of our license for retail will also allow us to transport, so we can take the waste ourselves and take it to a waste station. So we've talked to McNamara Waste, Steve McNamara, and they can accept that waste stream. They can also pick it up on site if we deem that necessary as well.
Okay, so in the instance, if you would be transporting it, I thought I saw some reference in your application that the two of you, was that relative to the waste that you'd be transferring, or was that just relative to the product?
Relative to product and waste, yes.
So has that been part of the review of the security plan with the police department?
That has. We've discussed the storage of that waste as well, and keeping that stored in locked containers in the Sally Port, and that it would be taken out of the Sally Port securely, either by the waste hauler or by us in transporting.
So by the time we get to the end of the public hearing, I think we need to understand which one it will be, and we'll need to understand from the police department that whatever that end decision is in that regard, that they have updated the security plan and that it includes that.
And that would
Okay.
be much easier to do once Captain Moriarty comes out on site.
Right,
Then we
right,
can
and I
walk
understand
in
some of this is still in process, but we'd want to have that buttoned up,
Okay,
okay?
sure. Thank you.
Yeah, Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, hi, gentlemen, thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for your prior investment in Holyoke. Ray Street Properties LLC, you have a lease?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is the lease in there?
I believe a copy of the lease went in with a special permit.
Okay, I haven't seen
look while you-
any of this, so, until tonight, so none of this was emailed to me, so I'm hopeful I can get it all emailed prior to the next public hearing. How long's your lease?
I'd have to check. I believe it's 5 years renewable up to 10.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, just,
I can check. I probably have it in my brief.
no, I believe you. That's good enough. We have and I saw, great, thank you. I saw in your, I glanced at it briefly when I came in. I saw in kind of your summary part that you anticipated some of the standard conditions that we've imposed upon every other applicant.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I
I
haven't.
tried to do this the right way and coming to the neighborhood and working through everybody.
Yeah, great.
So I know we have some ways to go on the plans, but we're working through that as well.
Great, and I haven't verified it for whether it looks pretty close. I mean, it might be probably spot on, but I can't remember all the, we have 7 or 8 that are fairly, I think we've done it pretty consistent with them all, so I would imagine.
We're very consistent. I believe I covered them all, but if we missed any, we will definitely.
Okay, so then, so as long as you're aware of that, and then just so I can understand, because it's always unclear to me, so you have you're applying for 2 licenses, and they are now pending with whom?
The Cannabis Control Commission, the state agency, state
Right.
licensing agency.
Okay, and where do they stand in that?
We completed
Process.
our application in August. They've come back with the first round of questions in October and also moved us forward to the background check phase and fingerprinting. So we've gone through the background check and fingerprinting. That was done in early October. So we just responded to their questions 2 weeks ago, I believe. So we expect either another round of questions. I've heard there can be 2 or 3 rounds of questions. I've talked to other owners, Solerge, or Holyoke Gardens. So based on what other people are seeing, it could be 2, maybe 3 rounds of questions from the state, usually about 3 weeks in between each round.
And so that's, though that's not one of our contingencies. Obviously, you need to have a license from in your case, at least one, but you're looking for 2 licenses. So that's a prerequisite as well.
I hope they'll deem our application complete by December, and then there's a 90-day period. I believe they have 60 days to talk to the municipality to get feedback and ensure that all the conditions are met. Then after that, then you can get preliminary approval. Then starts the inspections, and they will have to do site inspections. We've talked to them about the chain link fence as well, what the requirements for that will meet, because I believe their restrictions will be even more stringent than what we're looking at with the city. So we're working through all of that as well.
Then why do you want to be in Holyoke?
Carla was in Holyoke. Holyoke is the birthplace of a lot of things, and now it was one of the front runners for cannabis. So we've held several Pioneer Valley Cannabis Industry Summits, one at Nueva Esperanza, one at the Red Barn. Mayor Moore spoke at them. We had other mayors, Mayor LaChapelle. So we really want to bring keep the local feel to the industry. One of my concerns is that all this big money is coming from out of town. Those profits aren't going to be spent in stores on the street, So we're encouraging as many people locally. We've also offered to help with other people's documentation for state licensing to get minority and women-owned businesses started as well. So the more that we can do this locally, the more control we'll have over it, the more positive impact it'll have on the communities.
Okay, thank you.
Can you speak, switching gears, can you speak to us a little bit more about the concern around the co-tenancy within the building and how the business aspect and the security aspect will be separated?
Sure. There would be 2 entrances to our lobby area, which we will have a security guard there that checks IDs. It will be armed security guard based on the requirements of the chief. So these 2 doors will be buzzer access. So you can't even get into our lobby without buzzing the security guard that's inside. So once you buzz that door, and there'll be cameras through both hallways, so that's there's an entrance on Sargeant Street, a small vestibule that's got about 3 stairs, then comes into where the lobby will be. That exterior door will be one of the buzzer doors. The only other access will be from the back hallway, and that's where our handicap access is. And we're in the process of applying for a handicap variance to use common area for the handicap access. That will also be a buzzer door controlled by our security guard.
Okay.
So you can't get anywhere, even into our lobby, without buzzing a door and being buzzed in by a security guard. And they will have that recognition, so they'll have cameras to see everybody before they enter the
Okay, and
lobby. Then
Okay.
from there, there's another buzzer door that they have to get through to get into the retail space. That buzzer will also be controlled by the security guard.
Now, is this description that you have just provided verbally in the original application, so it's part of the security plan that the police department has already approved, or is this a change from when they first reviewed your security
All part of
plan?
the original security plan. The room in the back is for light manufacturing, and the area around it will be fenced in, and that's what we're just using as a sally port. The sally port is only for vehicles to access that back area. Then they still have to get through an access door, a secure access door, to get into manufacturing or to get into a man port. So between the sally port, then a man port, and then the retail space. So we have triple barriers on the backside before you can even get to the retail space.
Okay, and then circling back to the hauling of the debris out of there and the access to that, I guess, sally port that you're referring to, where is that accessed from?
The sally port, we will access, the only access to that sally port will be from the alley side, a garage door that's in the alley.
So, and that's your concern relative to,
Utility pole right out there that we've already talked to HG&E about adding additional light to. So we will be putting more LEDs in that back alley with HG&E. Yes.
but that is,
them come
it's a
out, follow them
usable
out, and
alley
also-
though, for that purpose?
I wouldn't say usable, but yeah, you can make it work.
And
I mean, okay, let me rephrase, usable, it's accessible for a truck to get into.
Yes,
Yes.
from that corner,
accessible.
yeah.
I'm
Good
also
luck in the
told
winter.
Sewer's supposed to be redone in that sometime within the next few years. So the alley may get redone and repaved. I think you know that, yeah.
One can wish.
That on the wish list.
Okay, all right.
So
Are
the
there
way-
any other
And I
questions
just
from
have,
the committee?
so that HG&E conversation, that's in writing in the original plans, correct? So that's in here?
That was,
Was that recently? So if you could just include that, because then I think that will exactly alleviate, but the lighting is bad back there, so exactly. If you have that in writing, then conversation have with the HG&E, I would like to see that included before the next public hearing, just so everyone could feel safer, including the tenants in the building right there. Thank you, gentlemen.
we're also adding them to the utility pole on the Ray Street side and the one on Sargent.
Perfect, thank you.
Right, so right now, what I have on the list for coming back with is the lighting plan and the settlement of which way you're gonna handle the debris and the removal of it. And then, whichever way it is, the updated security approval from the police department.
Was there traffic,
Now, in
Madam Chair?
terms, pardon?
Was there did you raise a traffic issue, Marcos?
Should
Traffic and
I
parking.
answer? I don't know.
Sure, Marcos.
Just want to make sure I'm
Kinda
going through the
round
chair.
table here.
Yeah, so the issue that we raised on traffic is just further understanding, for us to comment for you, is further understanding how they got to their statement that there would be no impact. Usually, someone will have ITE numbers, the International Transportation Engineers numbers, and there is a code for cannabis businesses that will indicate on average what the peak times are. So this is kind of, you go to a book and you look this up, you look at your business model and you make assumptions on when your peak times are going to be. So is everyone coming in at 9 a.m. or 9, or 5 p.m., whatever time it is. And so from there you can make assumptions on, am I having an impact on my neighbors or not? So
Okay,
there's
so-
an indication of, there's no, in the application, we won't have an impact, but we don't really understand how that was
Okay,
arrived at.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're looking for the applicant to do a formal review through this international transportation database or whatever it is that pertains to the business.
Right,
To reference it in their answer.
That's the standard way that it's done. If there's any other information that they would have that they could provide, then we could look at that. But at this
But
time,
that
we
would-
have nothing.
But
Yeah.
you're looking for a standard reference, so,
I wouldn't say nothing. I mean, we've talked to every business owner. We know what the traffic pattern is around there. We've studied it inclusively, so it's not that we haven't done nothing. I don't have an ITEW formal study. I can look into that as well.
right,
But
so,
I'm down there every day, so we do study the traffic habits. We did study the parking to come up with what we did. So we have thought through this very well.
I hear what you're saying and I hear what they're saying. Like, I hear you've done a process and I hear them saying they're looking for a formal benchmark as a reference. So it's dotting the i's, crossing the t's, and framing it in that context, I think is what. Council Roman?
Yeah, and thank you, gentlemen. I think that any increased traffic is going to help all the businesses down that alleyway, but I think what Marcos and his team are saying, and I agree with, is exactly just go to that IT site, and I think for me, too, before the next public hearing, if you could just formally just address or email back, like he sent us, we could provide you those list of 14 points, just at some point address all those 14, even if it's a document or whatever, because then that just helps the committee go through that process of saying, look, they answered all those questions, and, you know, go to Marcos's office. His team is great. I'm not speaking for his team, not saying they won't help you, but they'll be able to provide you at least with that website or reference so you guys can get those data points. And I agree, going from nothing to something is great, especially for that side of Main Street and the haunted house being down the street. Even though they impact our traffic, especially for that 1 month in October, every resident knows, especially the line stretch now all the way down to the Racing Mart this year. So we know that it is going to impact us to some degree. And even that time frame, how are you guys going to deal with that parking when on Friday, Saturday night, leading up to Halloween, it's triple busy, and they are now starting to park on that corner of Ray Street. So I think that those are some good things to have, and I think that that's one of the things we're just looking for as a committee. Answer those 14 or 15 points. I just got off the plane. I didn't even read them, but I will. And I think that it'd be a good start, and it's not a negative. I think that these are good questions to have. So that's all I just wanted to say. Thank you.
And as was noted earlier, just to remind you that within your plan where you have 30-minute parking, that would be a separate and distinct process. We can't grant that under the special permit. Just
Absolutely, we understand
FYI.
that. That would be a request through our counselor, which would be the Ward 2 counselor, I
Okay,
believe.
okay, just to be clear on that. Counselor Lisi?
So I know you had just talked about this question that was raised about how the co-tenancy is kind of being managed, and you talked about these 3 security doors, but I'm not sure if I understand how that is addressing the issues of co-tenancy, and if the space inside the building, the interior building, is separated through this chain link fence alone, or if there's other partitions. I'm not sure if I understood how what you described answers the issues that were raised related to co-tenancy and the security of the partitions.
And it is difficult
And
to explain.
into the microphone, if you don't mind.
It is difficult to explain without standing on the site. So we've gone through all of that access, and I assume that we will be able to easier address that with Captain Moriarty when he's on site, so we can walk through that. There will be no access from any other tenants. There are no doors coming from any other sides. The only access doors to our space will be from the sally port in the back, which the fencing is actually in the warehouse area. So it's in a rear space. It's not in the building. So the building itself is the end unit for that. So it's the walls that would actually divide the tenants areas.
Okay.
And there's only that one door that gets through there.
Okay, and so the co-tenancy is around the outdoor space, and the chain link fence is actually outdoors, not inside the building.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
In back of in back of the building, there's a warehouse space where I believe he operates an eviction service or something, and he stores all of the items in there, so it's basically just an open warehouse. That's where our manufacturing room is, and that's where the sally port is with the garage door access.
Okay.
But that's exterior to our retail space and our office space.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to offer the opportunity for any members of the public who are here to speak either in favor or in opposition to this application. If there is anyone here who wishes to speak, if you would just come to the microphone, give us your name and address. Folks are here for other reasons, and I know we're going to go ahead on the agenda to the Pine Street issue after this.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilor.
I'd just like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing to a date certain.
Okay, so before I get a second on that motion, what kind of turnaround time do you think you need on this list of questions that have been raised tonight to be able to circle back and have official answers?
And you've gentlemen seen this list, correct? This email we're referring to?
I have, and I've talked to Curtis. I would like to say thank you to the planning department, because we wouldn't be this far without the help of all of the staff there. So they've done a great
Thank you.
job helping us work through a lot of this. So we do appreciate that.
So, I mean, your choices in terms of us tabling, because we have to go to a date certain, are 2 weeks from tonight, or basically, or 4 weeks from tonight. Those would be the closest two, and then after that, it's basically moving forward 2 more weeks each time.
I think 2 weeks would be fine.
Go ahead.
So if you want to, and can I just do one more thing before we table to the next hearing? I just want to read into the record that on September 13th this year, from the clerk's office, she sent to the planning board, the health department, the building department, the fire department, engineering, water department, police department, stormwater authority, conservation, cell tower, regarding the application for a special permit to allow a registered marijuana retail establishment at 73 Sargeant Street. Petition was received on September 12th, 2018 for the city council meeting on September 19th, 2018, just to have it in the record that those were sent out.
So motion to continue the public hearing to November 27th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the public hearing is continued, and the time certain, can you just amend that to 6:30?
Oh, sorry, to amend 6:30 PM
Second.
On the 27th.
on the 27th.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Marcos, that was
Thank you,
very
Marcos.
helpful.
I take motion to just take out of order and go to 5 and 6, take as a package.
And there's one
Is there a
more, I
second?
believe.
Is there? Oh,
No.
No, you're right. Oh,
That's
well,
it.
item 11, since Counselor's here.
That's okay, that one can be separate.
Let's get all the way at the end, just take them up in one shot.
That's all right.
I make a motion to amend, to take up all 3.
Sure. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I'll read them all since we'll be taking them up as a package, but we'll be addressing them separately in terms of actions. Item 5, filed by Councilor Valentin, order that the resident parking only ordinance for Pine Street voted on recently be reconsidered and signs be taken down by DPW at this time. Several neighbors state that they were not notified of this change and are not in agreement with the rigidity of the ordinance as it is currently implemented. There is no official notification process at this time for resident parking only requests. A companion order, item 6, filed by Councilor Valentin, order that an official petition and notification process be implemented regarding resident parking only requests, such as the petition and notification process in place for speed humps via ordinance at this time. Proposed wording that no resident parking only be established except upon petition to the city council signed by at least 2/3 of the property owners or 2/3 of the registered voters within the impacted segment of a proposed resident parking only street. And third, item 11, which is a separate topic, filed by Councilor Valentin, ordered that a handicap sign be placed in front of 145 Essex Street for Carlos Espada. So,
Madam Chair, you want to just go to item 11 first, just get that out of the way, since
it's fine
it
with
should be
me.
pretty standard, so, I mean,
So hang on a sec, okay? So in the case of the handicap sign to be placed at 145 Essex Street, there was a site inspection made by a member of the Disabilities Commission in June, and there has been a recommendation made that the application be approved.
okay, so I'll move that the law department put into legal form and that we forward it to the city council for passage.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So that passes, and we'll get it in legal form into the next city council meeting. Okay, so back to items 5 and 6. Councilor Valentin, would you like to?
Sure. So accompanying item 5, we all received through email I received it from the residents and I forwarded it to Irma so that she could forward it to everyone. There's a petition with 20 signatures on it, and a lot of those folks are here tonight from Pine Street and that specific block. And the petition basically speaks about both of these issues in items 5 and 6. So it's kind of whichever one goes, before the other. But basically, it's been quite a while that that this order had been filed based on a petition from 2 residents on that block that one of them had actually come to the original ordinance meetings, and then it kept getting tabled because we were waiting to hear from DPW on what their recommendation was, so on and so forth. And so finally, when DPW came in, our city engineer actually gave the feedback and said, it's a residential block, I don't see why not. And so it got approved and it got voted on as full council. But what it brings is the issue that, as you can see in the petition signed by 20 folks from that block, is that we don't have a system in place to do 2 things. Number 1, to do these types of petitions. As ward councilors, as you know, Councilor Bacon and Councilor Bartley, we get approached often about requests that we may or may not agree with, but we put them in front of the body and we let the process take place. But there's no real process for these petitions regarding resident parking only, as there is, for example, with speed humps. And then the second part is the notification piece of it. So kind of like the petition of let's start the process, and then the notification process of this is where we're at. So obviously, when we have a petition with 20 people on the block saying, we're not in agreement with this, it's worth bringing back to the table. I've heard from some people that it's not that they're, not okay with some type of signage or specifics, but that the rigidity of how it is right now is problematic. So some of the suggestions that were made were definitely the petition process, also some type of language around visitor passes. That was something that was a concern. The possibility of it not being applicable perhaps on Sundays or holidays, and the possibility also of not applying to emergency vehicles or work vehicles if there's a specific project that's in place. So obviously these are very specific suggestions, but we're here again on this topic based on the petition that was signed by the 20 residents that you have in front of you. And many of them are here in the audience.
Okay, so just for the benefit of those folks that are in the office, in the council chambers, we have a copy of the petition with the order, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 signatures that were checked off by the clerk, probably being on the voters list, and then the remainder were marked as probably non-voters. That really doesn't have any purpose for what we're talking about, because this isn't about hearing the matter because of the petition. It's just sort of taking a measure of the response in the community after it got passed. From the point of view of the committee, at the time it was non-controversial. It may have just simply been because there was a lack of awareness in that regard. But I certainly am warm to the idea of creating a process, because it's gotten a little haphazard. Mm-hmm. It's also become questionable, how do you stop it if somebody started it 20 years ago and now the people don't want it anymore? Mm-hmm. So it's become a very messy sort of situation, because it's a much more popular thing that's been going on also. So if people want to, if you would like the folks that are here, Councilor Lisi?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to note that I too am in support of creating some sort of formal process. I would urge the committee to hold off on beginning with that process until we hear back from the city engineer on the order that I filed at the last meeting. We have had a number of requests before this body, I would say in the past 6 months, a number of requests for resident-only parking. Some have been denied, some have been granted, some has been permit parking. And really, we're seeing a lot of interest in the downtown again for both residential and business purposes. And it would be interesting to note how other successful cities are creating policies that work for both the business and residential communities in a particular city. So I asked the city engineer to research and provide the council with recommendations for how to change the ordinances related to downtown parking. So maybe there's an overarching set of principles that we could apply, as opposed to just creating a process for resident parking. But maybe there's like specific districts where it makes sense, or some sort of criteria. And so I would say we should keep this on the agenda, keep it moving forward, but I really think that we should have some technical feedback from the city engineer in the research that he does to figure out how other cities are successfully mitigating the parking needs for both business and residential people in the city. Thank you.
So the only other piece of information I wanted to offer is that I did receive a communication from our engineer, Robert Parent, relative to item 5, which is the order to look at reconsidering it and taking down the signs. And he indicated that if the council approves such, they'll remove the signs. And relative to the handicap, it was standard. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Councilor Valentin.
I just wanted to add also that I forgot to mention when I was giving an update that I was meeting with Chief Febo about other issues in the ward, and at the end of our meeting I said, there's a situation on Pine Street, we have these new signs, can you have folks in the department hold off on ticketing? And so that communication did go out through the Holyoke Police Department from Chief Febo saying, please do not enforce, it's being kind of re-discussed. And so I think pretty much everyone here knows that, but just to also say that if the signs don't come down, at least the messaging in the police department right now is that there is to be no enforcement based on the fact that all of this may or may not change. So I just wanted to say that for the record as well.
So hopefully I'm bringing forth all the information I've received, because I get emails and they get layered up really quickly. But is Wendy Urban here tonight? Okay, I was thinking that was you, but I wasn't positive. So I think what I would like to do is if people would be very brief. I just want to
suspend the rules, allow the public to address us for a period of up to 1 minute.
And I heard the
Thereabouts.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I just want to get a sense of who the people are here, if they're for or against or what.
Yep.
If there's an interest in us taking some sort of action tonight. So if folks could keep it brief, but come to the microphone, give your name and address, and let us know your position on the issue, understanding that whatever we do is going to be in the context of coming up with a process to make it a more open and understood process before changes like this are made in the future. Is there anybody, just come to the mic and give your name and address if you wish to weigh in.
Good evening. My name is Wilfredo Serrano. I live in 201 Pine Street. Yeah, I don't like the sign because I got 3 daughters, 1 in this state and 2 out of state, and they like to come and visit me.
Okay.
I don't want them to get a ticket because it's a sign in front of my house saying no parking.
Okay.
That's not fair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Jose Rodriguez, and I live in 200 Pine Street. And for the same reason, got my son, daughters, and relatives. My grandson come from New York. And, I mean, they're going to get tickets. And I don't want to, you know what I mean?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Miller. I live at 190 Pine Street. Okay. I'd like to see the signs come down. I have family that comes a few times a year. They stay overnight at my home, and I enjoy that. They won't come if those signs are there, and I don't think it's fair that I ask them to park on another street when they're staying with me overnight. Also, just yesterday, I had to have some work done at my house. A plumber came, he parked in front of my house, and before he even asked if he was at the right house or introduced himself, his very first words were, "Am I going to get ticketed or towed because of these signs?" So this is an issue that no matter, I don't know when people are going to stop by to see me. I don't think anybody does. Someone wants to drop in and they see those signs and it puts them off. And I think that's very unfair. So my own personal thing is that I would like to see the signs come down, please.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else wish?
Daphne Board, 197 Pine Street. I think Holyoke does definitely need a policy for the emergency vehicles and work vehicles for this. It just makes total sense. I personally would like to see the signs come down as well. I'm not opposed to some small amount of area. I don't know what the smallest amount of area you can have on a street. I know at the Wisteria Hearst, it's just one side of the street as opposed to the other. So I circulated the petition after Josie and I sort of like discussed it over email, and everyone that I talked to wanted to sign the petition. There were only 2 houses that I couldn't stop at, and then there are 2 houses that are currently being worked on. So like basically everybody else on the block is wanting to, they were just confused about what this even meant. I stopped at a house with, the woman was babysitting some kids, and she was just like, yeah, I was just talking about this to, my father. We have no idea where we go for a permit. There's no letter sent out from the city. I mean, it was just very confusing, and they just popped up. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And, okay. I was going to read it if you didn't want to speak.
You can read it if you want to. I'm all right with that. So I wrote it down just because I know that you guys got time limits. So I wanted to just say that the whole reason why I started the whole thing for the permit parking or for the residential parking was for one reason only. It was a solution to try to find, try to find a solution for the congestion that's going to happen on the north side of Pine Street once 185 opens for Virgilio's building. So the other problem, of course, and I discussed it with other members of the council, is the problem with the illegal activity that also happens between, I think it's I wrote it down, sorry. It's 189 Pine Street and 179 Pine Street. We have a lot of illegal activity that happens where people turn the corner, park their cars, do a lot of illegal activity, and then drive off. So I did a lot to try to get things to try to help the neighborhood. I believe the signs will help the neighborhood. I do agree that things happen where there's some confusion as to what the permit parking or what the residential parking signs mean to people. You can't have visitors, that's not true. You can't have people coming to your house and working on your house, that's not true either. I think that there's a level of ignorance that happened because the signs went up without any knowledge being given to the residents. So I'd like to see the signs stay up. I would be happy to see something happen with a time limit maybe, during certain hours of the day. Or I think there was somebody mentioned, I'm not sure who it was, but somebody mentioned earlier about, I think it was you that might have mentioned about days or something like that, but even one side of the street. But once that building opens, we're gonna have a minimum of 10 to 20 more cars on the street. If the signs get removed, I'm gonna have to ask the council for advice on whether or not our street is zoned as business, because we have business trucks and trailers that are parked on the street. We have daycare businesses that are ran out of people's houses. All of these things take up parking on the street that can be used for other people to park their cars from their houses or from Virgilio's business. So, but right now, as it stands with the signs, at least it minimizes the amount of traffic that turns the corner and parks. So, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and I just wanted to ask her address.
Oh, I'm sorry, 185 Pine Street. I mean, 186 Pine Street.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Sam Harris. I live at 190 Pine Street. I personally would like to see the signs come down, mostly because I think it's kind of like a waste of time and resources for the City of Holyoke and the Holyoke Police to be having to patrol Pine Street to see that people that are parking there have resident parking permits. And I've never really had an issue in the entire time that I've lived at Pine Street with parking on the street. I understand that there's going to be a building opening up right across the street from my house where there will be more residents on the street, but I don't see how the resident-only parking would alleviate that, because the people that would be parking on the street would be residents anyway, so they would be able to obtain a permit to park on the street anyway. Even when we've had like big snowstorms and there's been a parking ban where you can only park on one side of the street, I've never really had an issue. I'm not really the best driver and I can't really squeeze my car into tight spaces anyway, but I've really never had an issue with parking where I've had to park so far away because of the amount of cars on the street. So I think that it would just be best if the signs came down, because I don't see a need for them at the current time.
Thank you.
Hi, Lana Mahalik, 198 Pine Street. My idea is if you can maybe give a personal parking spot for the person that wants it, maybe that'll work out and we can just park like we used to, if maybe that's a solution.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you. Just by way of information, in terms of designating parking for a person for a residence, we cannot do that. We can only designate a handicapped spot, which cannot actually be designated for an individual. It can only be designated for a use through an application process. So my recollection of the hearing that we had relative to the resident permit parking was to try to be proactive relative to the anticipated increase in residents in the area for the residents that actually live on Pine Street. Clearly, the process and the communication didn't get wide enough throughout the street for there to really be, I guess, for the concept to be embraced at this time. So having it also be true that we've had more and more people coming in either wanting permit parking or in one case trying to get rid of permit parking, and all of us being unclear as to how we can even make that happen, I think it's very timely for us to set up a process so that on the one hand, a person or persons who are coming in out of a good intention to try to help their neighborhood don't, get pushback, because everybody will know, and if there's a difference of opinion or a lack of agreement in regard to the initiative, that it kind of won't all happen for nothing on the other hand. So I thank you all for coming down and letting us know where you stand on it. Crystal, if we can just, under suspension of rules, Crystal, can you inform us just relative to the ordinance that we passed? Did we cover from one number to another number certain, and so then it's in the ordinances from this house to that house? I mean, that's my recollection. I don't recall off the top of my head. I'd have to look. All right. But as it would be written, it would typically be that way, right?
Correct. We would have the engineer give us some plotted points from A to B.
Yeah, okay, so the only purpose for my question, not to pin you on exactly what the numbers were, was to try to understand if it had to be an all or nothing thing. Could we modify the ordinance and narrow it down to from here to here instead of from there to there, so that we don't throw everything away, but get rid of what's annoying the people in front of their homes? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Counselor Lisi?
So you're proposing a narrower section of the street, more limited?
Yeah. Just for now, but we would still move forward with coming up with a process. I mean, I see the relationship between the speed hump process and the parking permit, but I think the speed hump process is a little onerous.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. I don't know.
I mean, the other point that I wanted to raise is that perhaps, so it's a more limited area, but maybe it's an overnight parking for residents only, because I think that during the day, we do see, the plumber come or whoever else have to come and like attend to business, gardeners or whoever else who would want to have access to the street. So maybe it's, clarifying that it's overnight parking only for residents. Because really, the way it's written now, it is saying resident parking at all times, and that really starts to limit the ability for other folks to get onto the street.
Right, and it creates that feeling almost of a gated community, like, if you're not, kind of thing. But we did set up a thing similar to what you're saying and what was proposed about the overnight in front of that florist shop across from the residence, to accomplish exactly that, so that the people who live there weren't punished, but the business could still have access. And I can't remember what times we put on that, though. I want to say it was either after 8 or after 9.
I think it was probably after 9.
So
9 to 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning.
Yeah. So
7,
I don't even know. I'm going to see if I can find on my agenda if we had the numbers when we approved it in the past. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, just to answer your question, I think the permit's only between, for one block. So I believe it's between Appleton and Essex.
Oh, okay.
Correct. So it's between Appleton and Essex, both sides. I just wanted to, can I just make a couple points, Madam Chair?
Sure, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So I, for various reasons, I've been kind of involved with this. I think just because I know several of the residents, that's why. From what I'm hearing, I think we got some really good feedback tonight, and so to me, Madam Chair, I think you kind of hit it nail on the head. Where we could, and I heard from Ms. Mahalik too. We can't really say this parking spot is for a particular person, but I think what the chair lady mentioned is that we could tailor it so it almost has that effect that the area nearest to 186 Pine is limited to from the corner, from the south corner, or a narrow piece even. But for as narrow as possible near to 186 Pine, you could make from 186 Pine for that, whether it's 50 feet in length, you can make that for resident-only permit parking. And that might kind of solve this area so that anybody else can park anywhere on the street at any single time. I'm not making that motion. I'm just throwing out there for discussion. I just want to finish my couple of points, Madam Chair, if I could. So I think one of the things that we don't know is what's happening on Walnut Street. We have a big old fence that's been there for a long period of time. I don't know what impact that has on parking on Walnut Street and whether there's a spillover effect to Pine Street. I think we should probably hear from the building commissioner on that. I think I'd like to hear from the building commissioner anyhow as to how long that fence is going to be there. I think that the way this worked, so everybody knows that this is an order filed. It was a public order filed. We had, I don't know, 5 or 6 meetings. We're under no legal obligation to send out a written notice. So a constituent asked the ward councilor to file an order. The ward councilor filed the order. We had, like I said, 5 or 6 meetings. Finally, at the last meeting, we approved it. So it was nothing the city did or didn't do. I'm sorry you didn't get notice, but there was really no obligation to do so. Then all of a sudden the signs went up. But I don't want anyone to be critical of the process, because the process was followed. Now, whether or not you were communicated with, that's another question, and I feel bad about that. But maybe we can amend that process. I also want to say that in speaking with the director of the YMCA, she was also concerned about having resident-only parking for that whole part, only because some of her some of the users of the Y, rare occasion, but on Saturdays when they have swim meets and they have spillover parking that can't even fit into the other parts of Pine, and it affects them. And the Y is such, as we know, is such an iconic part of Holyoke, and we want to really be sensitive to their needs. We are grateful to the Y for the parking that they put in, and the executive director's been very helpful in saying, I know she has, to any neighborhood area residents, if you want to use that for overnight parking, that lot's been made available. And I think the Y should be really credited for being as gracious as they have been, because that was quite an ordeal to get the parking lot in there. And ultimately it was successful, but it was quite an ordeal to do so. But the Y's been nothing but a wonderful, wonderful neighbor for that area of Holyoke, and really for the city of Holyoke in general. So I want to make sure that's noted on the public record as well, Madam Chair. The one last piece I hope the residents know, and there's a committee that I chair, and in that committee we have an order to, directly behind the 185 Pine Street block, there's an alleyway, and then there's a little pocket park, if you will. One sliver of that pocket park, I believe, is going to be declared surplus property, probably in the next few weeks at the next meeting that I chair. Once that's declared surplus property, it will be then sold to either at auction or through the RFP. And it's my opinion that one of the large property owners, or perhaps all three, might procure that and use that for off-street parking. So that should alleviate some of the pressure from the on-street parking on the section of Pine between Appleton and Essex. I'm not sure if any of you knew that, but that is a public process, and I'm going to chair that meeting on the 26th of November. It's my opinion that we'll declare that surplus at that time, and at some point in December, the full city council will approve that, and then it'll be up to the mayor to sell that. So I think that'll have a positive effect in anticipation of the building being open with Mr. Virgilio, and also Tony Whitman has a couple buildings on Beach, and I think Mr. Bosco has a building on the corner of Appleton and Beach. So those would be the three interested developers. So please be aware that's coming down the road as well. And so with that public service announcement, I'm set. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can, to the ward counselor, from a logistics point of view, where is okay, so I've heard a couple people say they have the signs in front of their homes and they don't want them there. So if we're looking at a corner and we're looking at 186, are we near a corner? Are we in the middle of the block?
Well, the one person you heard from that really wants these signs to stay is Wendy, who has sent her communication, and she's at 186, right, Wendy?
186.
Yeah.
So it's two.
So if you look at if you enter Pine, 186 is basically that at the second home, right there at the corner. So it's one home and then Wendy's.
Okay.
And then the signs go all the way until Essex.
Okay, so if the signs ran from the corner to that second house, is that gonna stop any of the people?
Well, it would basically cover
the two houses,
two homes.
Right.
But the folks that are at the corner of Appleton and Pine are not here, and so I mean it would impact the front of their home. But
so there's not signs in front of everybody's home, is there?
Well, they're throughout the block, kind of just the same way they are in front of Wisteria Hearst Museum. They're kind of like spread out, and when you look at the arrows, it covers the whole block.
Okay.
So, and it's on both sides. So the 186 Pine is right across the street from the 185, which is the building that's being redone.
Okay, so what I'm trying to see is, would it be reasonable for us to modify the ordinance that says, whatever it says, from here to here to there, and put the time, resident parking only, 9 PM to, consistent with what we've done. And Crystal, I just can't find the exact time we
Can't
did
find
in
it
front
either.
of the flower shop on,
I don't think she was here at the time, so.
but I'm
we'll
trying to
look it
think of
up.
the street and the address it's on, but
It's South
anyway,
Street.
we can, pardon?
South Street.
Right, South Street, but we can find it,
We don't have resident parking on South Street.
Madam Chair?
no, but we limited the overnight, we said,
We've done it on McIntosh Terrace, that's for sure, but
right, but what we did is we made 30-minute parking in front of the flower shop, and then we said something to, so it was available.
no,
for
it's
the-
just 30-minute parking.
There's no
There's no limited hours on
I
it?
thought we did a time
What,
thing.
maybe it's the McIntosh
Well,
Terrace then?
Maybe I'm,
McIntosh Terrace, yeah.
Is what, no overnight parking?
time?
That's no overnight parking.
From what time to what time?
I'm just trying to be
Maybe
consistent, so.
10 PM to 7 AM?
Yeah.
Something along those lines?
So if we could, I mean, my thought would be if we could run it from the corner to the 186, that gives a couple of spaces that are resident only, but it's only limited at night, consistent with other ones. If it's 10 to 7 or 9 to whatever, let's have it be consistent. So if we're doing resident parking with times, we run it consistently. I mean, I'm just throwing this out as a thought for the moment till we get to a process. Counselor McGivern.
And who would qualify for resident parking only stickers? The entire street?
Yeah. I mean, it's, at the end of the day,
So you got
parking-
about 30 or 40 cars trying to fit in 4 spots.
Well, but right now, it's gonna be 30 or 40 cars fitting in the 10 or 12 spots. I mean, the bottom line is it's first come, first serve.
Well, if I may, I mean,
Yes,
the
Councilor.
bottom line is you have 20 people who signed a petition saying, we don't want this at all.
Right.
You have one resident here tonight, which is that segment that you're talking about, which includes 186 Pine, which is basically from the corner of Appleton and Pine to the second home in,
Right.
that person is saying, I still want this to be in effect. So
Well-
if in essence, you modify the ordinance so that it's only those first 2 homes and the rest of the block, the signs come down,
Right.
then all of these folks are content. And so, which clearly, I mean, it's what you're hearing. And so, I mean, it's up to the committee what you want to do. I think Councilor Lisi wanted to recommend something, but again, the folks that are at the corner of Appleton and Pine are not here. And so it may just be what it is, but
Right,
anyways.
so just to be clear, right now, this minute, while we're sitting here, the ordinance is what it is with all the signs up. So for us to affect any change, we have to do something tonight and recommend it to the city council.
Correct.
I think we can have a win-win personally by modifying the ordinance instead of throwing it completely out. It will accomplish everybody who came to the mic and said, I want the sign down, having it down. And it will accomplish a narrowing of the residential parking, but have it be available for those people who choose to go get the sticker and choose to use it. And if you don't, you don't. You don't have to do it. And if the people want to, they can. But it's not giving a person a spot. It's just giving residents on the street the ability to get a permit to use the spots. So I just want to be clear on what we aren't doing. But Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. I have a question and then I have a proposal, so if you'll bear with me. My question is the signage that's on the Wisteria-Hearst area, that says parking by permit only.
It's
and we have a
exactly
permit.
the same signage that is on Pine Street right now.
It
And,
does-
and there are no complaints on that block at all. I mean, they requested that and it's there and they have stickers.
Yeah, but my point is, I thought it was like parking by permit only, and therefore we have designated a permit process, where in this case, in my mind, it says resident only, and there's nothing to designate who is or is not a resident. I don't know if we set it up. We did it in the same way?
I just think the problem was because in the case of near Wisteria-Hearst, most of the people knew. In this case, most of the people didn't know. So they knew to go get a permit, and the folks over here didn't. And so I just think it played out differently.
And what ended up happening was that, because I spoke to our city clerk about it, is when Wisteria Hearst happened, and that block that has that signage on across from Wisteria Hearst is basically two homes that have a number of tenants in there. And so this block is very different because you're talking about, several homes that are impacted by the designation of the area. What happened with the Wisteria Hearst piece was that as soon as the agreement was made and we voted on the resident parking only, what happens is the city clerk then sends letters and says, this is the process to request stickers. And so when we voted, or actually I wasn't at that meeting, when you all voted on approving the Pine Street block, which was October 2nd or whatever that date was, Brenna actually started getting calls at the city clerk's office saying, why are these signs up? And so she held off on sending out the information on how to get the resident parking sticker because she reached out to me and said, I'm hearing from neighbors that don't want this. Are we changing it? And so the notification process of how to get the sticker has been very different because in Brenna's mind, based on the calls and the input she's getting, it may not stay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. So so there's a question. The comment that I wanted to make is, well, I understand the desire to create a win-win situation out of designating like a very narrow portion of the city. It's two houses worth of signage that would be put up to put the resident-only parking sign there. I feel that becomes policy making that is it really is only benefiting an individual, and I don't feel like we make policy for particular individuals. We make policy for the community, and so I'm going to say that I'm going to be reluctant to create some policy that narrows the area in that way because it just seems that it's in my mind similar to like a spot zone type of thing where it's just out of sync with the rest of the needs of the area. I understand that there's been a proactive attempt here to mitigate some anticipated traffic issues, but we're not actually seeing those traffic issues at this point in time. And based on the comments that Councilor Bartley mentioned earlier, where there may be additional parking created in the area to alleviate some of the anticipated impact of additional housing units, I don't know if it's appropriate to keep the signs up for essentially one house that is requesting this at that point in time. I don't agree with that in principle. I don't believe in creating a policy for our city that benefits only a single individual.
So your point is taken. I'll recognize you in just a minute. From my perspective, we went through a process, whether faulty and could be improved, which I agree it could be, but I think we went through a proper process and we came to the creation of an ordinance. We've since then received feedback from people that was unanticipated at the time, and I think we want to be responsive to the people in that regard. However, I take your point and I don't disagree with it, but we have in front of us now an approved ordinance. I think if we limit the scope of the ordinance, we're not doing it for just one purpose. We're limiting the scope of an ordinance that was properly approved to respond to new information from the people being affected by it. So to me, I take your point on the policy thing, but I mean, we have before us a local law that we created. Now we're looking at modifying it to meet better the needs of the street and the community and the neighbors. And I think the fair thing to do isn't just to pick one. We cannot put a parking space for a person in front of their house. We've already been to that rodeo. We can't do that. But we could just leave 2 permit parking signs up. The people who choose to go get the permits, go get them. You don't choose to go get them, fine. It's a free country. You don't have to. You can if you want. And that would leave 2 spots to go through that process if people want to. And I would say do 2, not 1, because I take your point totally on that. go from a corner to a point.
When you,
You know.
I'm sorry, when you look at the street view, it would definitely be more than 2 spots, just so you know. I mean, if you go up to 186, it's 2 homes, literally, but the space for vehicles is probably at least, I'm gonna say 4. It looks like 4 spots when you look at, from the corner to in front of 186.
You can't park so many feet next to a corner.
Right, like 30 feet.
No, I know, but
to
I'm
the corner.
looking at, I mean, the street view itself already has 2 cars in front of it, of the home, and there's already space for at least a 3rd vehicle.
Okay, so if you
You see
know
what I'm saying?
this, if you know this, I'm gonna guess there's a sign near 186 already that has an arrow going the other way?
There a
Yes,
sign right in
no.
front of it? Yep.
Okay, so if we ask them to take down all the other signs except that one and revise the ordinance to reflect such, I
Second.
think we're done.
Second.
That's, okay. Counselor McGivern?
Well, I'd like to get back to what Councilor Lisi said and back to what I asked and just point out the flaw in this is, I understand residential parking. I grew up in a neighborhood. Back then, there was 1 car per family if you were lucky, and it worked. Now there's a family of 4 and there's 5 cars. It doesn't work. If you just allow residential parking in front of these 2 addresses, anybody on the street can apply for a residential parking. When the apartment building opens up, everybody in the apartment building can get their residential parking and park right across the street from the apartment building. So it defeats the purpose of residential parking for the person who originally asked about this.
Well, it may and it may not, because the reality is right now, the whole block is permit parking only. The same will be true if you have 12 houses with the signs or 4 houses with the signs. At the end of the day, as long as the people are legitimate residents under permit parking only, it's still first come, first serve. As long as you have more cars than people, it's always going to be first come, first serve. I mean, I'm looking for a compromise. I think the process was done correctly, as flawed as our process may be. And I think a person who comes in, or person or people who come in and do the process correctly should not get punished because then people don't agree with the outcome. On the other hand, our purpose here is to serve the public. So if we can modify it and end up with more happiness, less discontent, but not throw out the process that the person or people properly did, let's just do it and then fix the process so going forward, we'll do it better. That's my take on it. So if anybody, and
Was that?
I'll make that as a motion.
Well, I think I seconded your motion.
I'm going to amend the motion and motion instead that we delete the ordinance and take down the signs as was requested by the maker of the order in item number 5. And if there becomes a parking issue, then we can revisit it with new information. I just don't see the need, yes, we went through the process, all the proper channels and protocols were followed. We had a narrow view of the information and situation there, and in light of more information, I feel that there's no problem in saying we made a mistake at that point in time. It may be the right solution at another point in time, but based on what I'm seeing and hearing right now, the resident-only parking is not working for that street and those residents, and there may be a time where we need to create resident-only parking. But at this point in time, it doesn't seem that we're really servicing a real need. It's an anticipated need, and I don't think we're at that bridge yet.
Okay, so we have 2 motions before us. We have, and if under discussion,
Yeah,
Council Roman.
I truly, and this is with all due respect to all the tenants, this is something that I deal with all the time in the ward, so I hear what you're saying. I truly don't have a dog in this fight, but I'm truly deflecting and respecting the ward councilor, and what I'm hearing is that you all would like to start fresh. As someone who's seeing a lot of development in the neighborhood, in my neighborhood, I hear what you guys are saying. I think deleting it and starting fresh from when you all listen, and I applaud you for bringing this motion to us, because I think being proactive is better than reactive. But if the will of the community is that, and it's not an I told you so moment, but if the apartment building opens up and the floodgates open, then we'll be back at this same juncture. And so I do want to respect hearing the will of the people and that foreboding cautionary tale. And as someone who has created resident-only parking on the other side of Pine Street, really the whole other opposite end, and it's for a lot of that same illegal activity. We had to create that resident-only parking because we literally had dealers lining up the cars in a row to buy. So I want to respect you and acknowledge you and thank you for bringing this to us. And I also want to respect and acknowledge those residents who signed the petition. So I'm seconding it out of respect, hearing from abundance of the people saying, hey, start fresh. I think I happen to agree with my colleagues that the process was done correctly. And we seem to be facing this more and more. I was happy to see that our public access channel was saying that this meeting was going to be televised tonight, because hopefully we can get more out there and not just the media. But I think that overall we have to do a better job of somehow, some way communicating this, because it's always the biggest complaint that I hear back from us. And it's not that we don't try, it's not that we don't post. I know I'm still waiting for the damn post outside that we approved years ago, but I won't get into that dogfight today. But we have to do better to some degree. But I just, what my concern is truly this: if we amend it to just that corner and section, I'm going to get people to call me tomorrow from my ward and say, hey, that happened on the other side of Pine Street. So I want you now to amend the ordinance for our block that you just created resident-only parking from, and get rid of those because this half of the block doesn't want it or this half does. So that's the only reason why I truly, it's tough, but I'm going to second the motion. I don't think we're going anywhere because there's only 4 of us, so I can see how the votes might shake out. So this might go to council without recommendation maybe, I don't know, and we might have to fight it out there, but I'm just going to second it for the sake of that, and just to thank you, and thank you all for being here tonight. So I don't know.
Okay, so on that point, I'm just going to weigh in, and I'll recognize you, Councilor Lacey. I take your points, but right now, tonight, if we change this ordinance, we have not established any other process that can take place other than the one that already took place to create what we currently have. There is nothing to stop the folks on your street from coming back to you and doing this. So, under the current ordinances. So, I mean, to be concerned about creating a first instance, you know, I don't know. I see your point, but tomorrow you could get a petition that says we want some of these undone. And so the question becomes, does the person who went through the, person or people who went through the proper process to get something done, just get it undone, because then a plurality of people who under any other ordinance may or may not have had standing, and I'm not dismissing or diminishing anybody, get to just come in and say, you know, I don't like what happened, so I want it undone. So I'm trying to look for a win-win till we get a better process. And so we can vote on the amended motion, which is to take them all down. That was a secondary motion, so we can vote on that first. I can't support it, but did somebody else want to speak on one or the other of the motions first? Councilor Lisi.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that item 5, taking down the signs and deleting the ordinance, is separate from creating a process in item number 6.
Correct.
So they're 2 separate issues.
Correct.
I think that we should keep item number 6 in play, and hopefully we could have some feedback from our city engineer, which I requested, in terms of, you know, how do we create a process? How do we create, you know, some rules and criteria for where residential business, overnight residential parking should be, so it really can become much more regulated and predictable.
And I think they'll be ready to weigh in on that at our next meeting.
Oh, good. Oh, good. The city engineer is what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great. And so I think that there is a short-term, in terms of timeline, there's a short-term timeline to move forward on item number 6 in terms of creating process, but I think that the ordinance that we created, although by the proper means, is not serving the public and the residents. And we do, in a democracy, we make decisions by plurality. And the plurality that's here, and I haven't heard anyone else speak in favor of the signs, even at the meeting that we had to originally establish them, except for a single individual. And I do. I understand the desire to be proactive, and I applaud it. But it's just, it's not. We're not remedying an existing problem or situation at this point in time, in my opinion.
Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah, just would like to make 2 points. First, I find it extremely ironic that we've got some members of the public that just a short period of time ago, we were seeing signs that said, "Don't park on our history," and the last thing we need is more parking lots downtown. And now here we are in this very same neighborhood listening to a parking shortage, a parking problem. So I wanted to get that point across. The second point is, if one of the reasons for putting these signs up is because of people coming around illegal trafficking, a sign is not going to stop that. All right? If they're illegally trafficking and that kind of activity is going on, a permit is not going to do anything to affect that situation. And it's the kind of activities that have already been organized by those ward councilors and the efforts that we need to make with our police department to do something else about that kind of activity. But certainly not having a sticker and risking getting a parking ticket isn't going to stop that. So I'd be in favor of just seeing these signs and this whole thing go down altogether.
Did you want to be recognized?
Sure.
Mr. Bartley?
First of all, this whole notion of democracy, we're not going to get into that right now because that's really off the charts. But listen, we started this process with the same order from the same counselor in good faith. I have no worries about that. So we did it one way, and now we're doing a total opposite, and we're spending an inordinate amount of time on this, which we're happy to do. But we did it the first time in good faith upon the petition of one person. So the ward counselor, the same ward counselor filed this order, filed that order. We followed the steps. We did it, and now the exact same thing is turned around. So I feel like because we were helpful to that, yes, it was one individual. That's great. Why don't we sort of keep that sign in place? So let's see how it works for a period of time. Okay, we know it's a disaster. The rest of the streets, the rest of the block. It would have been nice if we had some feedback from the rest of the block or through its representative prior to this, but we didn't. We took in what we had in front of us. It wasn't our job to poll the neighborhood, but now the neighborhood's been polled. We get it. But we have somebody with a legitimate concern, I feel. So, why have to, negatively impact her life? I heard what Nelson said. Nelson, you're probably very right. We're probably going to get calls. But I'll tell you what, I learned something from my father a long time ago, that don't file an order unless you believe in it. Just don't file it just to file it because one person might have said it. Do some research, figure it out, and try to get behind it because it makes sense. Don't just file it because somebody said file it. Do your work beforehand. Now we're in the situation that we're in, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that. I'm just saying this is how we got here. And I hear these arguments constantly. Well, we have 8 people for it and 1 against, and that's democracy. What? There's no scientific poll to that. And by the way, since somebody's a political scientist, the Bill of Rights are in place to protect the rights of the minority, not the majority, and that's democracy. So there's a little history lesson for you. So okay. I would much rather have.
I just want to make it clear that I wasn't the one that raised the issue of a plurality. I was just using the same language.
I'd much rather have a vote.
And second of all, not everybody has a father who was on the city council who give them those tips for how to file an order appropriately.
My father was never on the city council.
Thank you.
Right. He was never on city council, but you can look up that history later on. So I heard you on that, Nelson. I'd really like to sort of see if you can back off that position, see if we can keep the signage for right here. Otherwise, we're gonna be stuck. And we have one person with a legitimate concern, honestly filed in good faith by the ward councilor at the time. I mean, frankly, I think we should give it a shot, and maybe in a few months from now, if that's still no good, then we can revisit it. But that's my take.
Okay, so we have a motion before us, which is to take down all the signs. So on that motion, anybody in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
I'm a no.
So that motion fails. So we have the primary motion before us, which is to narrow the scope of the ordinance from number 186 to the corner, whatever that street is. Can you help me out?
Appleton?
Appleton. From 186 to Appleton, remove all the other signs that are offensive and problematic to the neighbors, narrow the ordinance, and then we will move forward to create process for future needs relative to this.
That's a different order. Right, so we're just voting on item number 5, which is amending.
I'm just putting the motion in context because that's number 6. But I'm putting it in context. And so I'm really hoping one of the colleagues will join us on approving this. This is a no harm, no foul. Everybody will be happy in the moment. It's not going to be perfect, nothing is, but it's a win-win.
Just for clarification, Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So that would be then voting on item 5, item 6 is still to come, correct?
Right, we're on item 5
Perfect. All right,
right
thank
now. Okay, so on that motion that would keep everybody in the room
Yes.
having their needs met, I would hope I get at least 3 yeses. All in favor? Aye.
No.
Aye.
So that motion passes 3-1, so we've amended the ordinance from 186 to the corner. Please ask DPW to remove all the other signs in front of everybody else's house. However, if you do choose to go get a permit, you can have the permit to use whatever spaces remain in the narrowed ordinance. That would be available to people living there. As
And
it
for
stands.
number 6.
Now, that's assuming the council approves it.
Number 6.
This is a committee making a recommendation to the council.
I'd be of the opinion that we should I won't make that motion unless someone wants to say something, but I'd be of the opinion we
Yeah.
should probably table number 6.
Table it to the 27th.
Until 27. Okay, motion, well, unless the maker wants to say something now, and I wasn't clear.
No, I mean, I don't want us to be in this situation again because it's happening too often.
No, no.
Yeah, it's
you're-
a better
you're-
I'm fine with tabling it
Well,
once the
frankly,
city engineer is
I'm very
coming.
warm to the language, the way you wrote it, but I think hearing what we heard earlier, we should table it. So I just want to make sure you had okay, so motion table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So item 6 is tabled, but I will put it on the agenda for the 27th because that's when DPW comes in regularly, our second meeting of the month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to regular order. Item 3.
Oh, I have motion to take number 3 off the table.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 3, filed by Councilors Sullivan and Bartley, ordered that the City Council and Mayor amend the city ordinances to create a commission whose purpose is to consider all aspects of the Whiting Street Reservoir. The commission should be comprised of Holyoke residents only. The charge of the commission should include reviewing costs to maintain the reservoir and repurposing it for future use, as well as ensuring that reasonable environmental considerations are maintained. Councilor Sullivan is the primary maker of the order. Do you want to weigh in, or Councilor Bartley?
Sure. Mike, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. Just a little background for the committee and the public to start with. Councilor McGivern and myself had met previously at a water commissioners meeting and gotten some in-depth information from them. Councilor Bartley had them in front of the Development and Government Relations, where we had a very lengthy and informative presentation from the manager and the commissioners about the future needs in general for the water department. And one of the things that came out of both of these is one thing we know for sure about Whiting Reservoir is right now the water department, the city, does not need this as a water supply. All right? That is for the foreseeable future. Foreseeable future, probably not in the next 50 years. Might we need it 50 or 100 years from now? Yes. Is it a good asset? Yes. All right? So working within those parameters, we're now also faced with having to invest $2 million, $2 million in a city that is strapped for cash to do state-mandated repair works on this facility, all right? A facility for which we'll have no foreseeable use for the next 50 years. So if we do not invest that $2 million very shortly, the state's going to come down on us, and we're going to have to drain that reservoir down, all right, as a safety issue, all right? And it's not a safety issue regarding the quality of the water or anything like that. It's regarding the structure itself, all right? So if we invest that $2 million to preserve it for something we might need 50 or 100 years from now, as it exists right now, it'll sit as it exists right now, and it'll just be like that with another $2 million invested in it. All right? I think that there's better things we could do with it while we're waiting for some potential use in the future if we're going to invest that $2 million. Something that will do two things: create recreational opportunities for the citizens, as well as produce revenue for the city. And I think we can do both, but it's a very, very complicated issue. It's one that really needs some study, and what we're proposing here is to form a commission to do this study. I think the commission should be composed of someone from the water department, someone appointed by the commissioners and the manager, someone from conservation, our conservation director, someone from economic planning and development, for starters. I think we need to have members of the general public involved. I'd like to see several council appointees. I'd like to see one mayoral appointee, all right? And also, I think to avoid conflict as we go through this, like I say, it's a weight issue, probably some ad hoc members, non-voting members, probably people representing trustees of reservation, the DCR, Department of Conservation, are here, so they can weigh in on this, because anything to do with this would definitely be affecting them and the abutters. I think we have a obligation for stewardship and protection of the area, but I think there's a lot of possibilities. Besides the stewardship, we've got to conserve the land, the water, the wildlife, but also we have an opportunity to provide a refreshing outdoor recreation experience. We've got the Boys Club stuck on one side of it with a property that they've put out RFPs to try and do something and have had no results. But there's many areas to look into. Everything from mountain biking, fishing, zip lines, canoeing, equestrian trails. It's incredible the things that could happen up there. And
can I ask a question though?
Yep, go ahead.
Isn't the water department ultimately responsible for that body of water vis-a-vis the state before anything can be done with anything? I mean, can we establish a commission that supersedes the water department, who is has the responsibility for all those laws? And
the commission wouldn't be superseding anybody. It'd be just coming forward with a recommendation for a path forward. The water commissioners would be a part of that study.
Right. So
Yes.
I guess I'm just a little confused why we would need to do this by ordinance.
Well, as I understand it, to come forward with a commission like this, it'd be something through ordinance to form this commission.
Okay.
Am I correct on that, David? Or maybe you can take over. I think I've made.
I don't want to jump much. Finish your thoughts, Mike. And
Sorry,
I'm pretty much through it. I mean, I think there's a lot that could be done with this over the next 50 years, both to produce revenue and still preserve it for future use without investing $2 million just to have it sit there right now, and a few people can ride a bike or walk a dog around it. That's a huge investment for in a cash-strapped city. If there's other really good things or viable things or other opportunities that should at least be explored.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, so let me just step back for a second. Yes, the water commissioners are ultimately in the position to make the determination upon what happens. When they were here prior and before a DGR committee, we said to them, we need to understand the legal process to shut this down. That will be part of the charge of this committee to take in testimony as to how and get the process. How do we shut down this if in fact that's what body suggests? That we need to understand it. Your question is, why do we put this to ordinance? Well, Madam Chair, respectfully, there are other ad hoc committees that are set up by the executive, for example, that do not meet. They may have met once. So my thinking was put it into ordinance, set it up officially through the channels of the city government to have city council involvement where we're going to be involved from the start, especially making appointments. I've already had 5 separate people contact me because they're so interested in this commission. They want to be part of it. They understand that there's, yes, they'll take a vote, but there'll be all recommendations. And I want to hear from the minority in the committee and the majority. And so our job, our job as counselors is going to be, I think, just to set up the mechanics, set up the charge of the committee through our law department and set it into ordinance. Yes, your points are excellent. They're not going to be able to switch the switch on the, and ultimately we know that it's an act of the great and general court that has to shut this. We know this.
Okay.
But wouldn't it be nice if we had a local body so designated in ordinance by the city council with appointees from the mayor and from the city council, a true body of Holyokeers with an ad hoc committee, as Mike said, for potentially non-Holyokeers, maybe DCR, maybe the Boys and Girls Club, maybe the trustees of the reservation. They could advise, and we'll get some input from the law department. But we have this really great group of true Holyokeers and people interested in that land. And you'll notice in there we're very sensitive to the environmental impact. And then we have this presentation, and we put it before the water commissioners. This is what we think of going forward as a body. And by the way, we'll have a water commissioner or his or her designee on a conservation commissioner or his or her designee, a planning board member or his or her designee. That's what we want to set up via ordinance. So it's our thinking that we can ask the law department, based upon the input we have now, to come back with some draft language. So I would like to, I think the way Mike laid it out is something based on, we had a conversation earlier. We're thinking maybe 9 or 11 members. It doesn't have to even be an odd number, because it could be 12. Because we're not taking a us against them vote. This is all just recommendation, and I want to hear both sides. So if 10 of them make a recommendation, 2 say they want something different, it's important to hear from the 2. And ultimately, we'll put something together. We'll compile it as best we can, and then we'll present it to the water commissioners. If the water commissioners go forward, they can take it to the state rep and the state senator to carry the ball to Boston and see where it goes. But it's got to start with just a. It doesn't have to be a really in-depth ordinance. We can make. I think the ordinance. I think what we want to say, and Crystal will be pivotal in this. Where to put in the ordinance book, whether we have 10 or 12 members. I think it's important that we have 5 or 6 city council at-large appointees. We certainly should have 1 mayoral at-large appointees, and we should have other appointees from conservation, water, and planning, and however it's made up, it's going to be of Holyoke people, Holyoke residents on that commission, and then we will also put within the text of the ordinance, yes, those commissioners should find out what is the legal process to close it. It doesn't have to be it's already in law.
Right.
The law is established. We just want to get the so contact the state rep. Say, state rep, would you ask the general counsel to the general court what is the legal process? It's as simple as that to find out what the legal process is. And then committee members, what do you think is the best use of this going forward? Because as Mike indicated, really little or no argument presented by even the manager of the waterworks to say this is ever going to be put back online. As Evie Chesky, I think it was Evie Chesky might have said, but it wasn't me. Holyoke is water rich and land poor. But as Mark Twain rightly said, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And Holyoke's got the water. Holyoke's got the water. And that makes a difference. Now, I know we're all sick of the doggone rain, but we've got water, and we've got good water, and a lot of communities wish they were in our particular shoes. So, that being said, I'll shut up, and we can figure out a way to sort of get a draft. Thank you.
Councilor McGivern?
Thank you. I'd just like to weigh in. I think the important thing here this evening is the vision. The vision of Councilor Sullivan, the vision of Councilor Bartley, and many people, I think, who would like to see this piece of property, which once served a purpose as drinking water, be used correctly, appropriately, but for a number of different things that could benefit many of our residents and actually could benefit the region itself. It is a financial issue, but regardless, it's a financial issue, and the water department, is in control of this, and it's because it's the ratepayers that, are responsible for the mandate that Councilor Sullivan talked about. The water is offline, has been offline for some time. What we're talking about is, which is a much more lengthier process, is decommissioning it, which means it completely comes out of the jurisdiction of water, and if drinking water. And if that's only one approach. You can still do something in its current condition, in its current status, but you have to do it with permission, and you have to do it carefully in terms of the passive types of use that you can, and Councilor Sullivan outlined a number of them. I think the commission is important, because I think the more people we involved, the easier it's going to be down the road to take the final votes and to create something that everybody's in agreement. And I think doing it by ordinance is fine. It doesn't have to be done by ordinance, but I think it's a good way to do it in terms of determining who should sit on the commission. My only feelings is yes, city council should have so many appointments. The mayor, at least one of the water commissioners, although we do appoint the water commissioners, should sit there, and the ad hoc members should be the superintendent of the water department, our engineering, so forth. Perhaps Parks and Rec should have a voice in it too. And there's so many ways we can create this, and there's other visions that we have to listen to, and we should keep our ears open. So I think the abutters are important. The owners of the Wyckoff Golf Course Country Club, I think they should have at least one voice on the commission. Some residential, which Mike mentioned, ad hoc in the Bemis Heights area, the Mount Tom, reservation. There's a lot to take into consideration. There are acres up there that are not directly in the watershed, some privately owned, some owned by the water department, that also could be developed with the right plan and carefully with the idea of preserving the area, but at the same time appropriately developing the property itself. It makes sense. When the Water Commission met with DGR, they are looking to put, with the mayor's permission and our permission, they're looking to bond, and one of the parts of what they have to bond for, besides the infrastructure, which we all were briefed on, is what has to happen to this reservoir. And it's both the spillway, the breachway, and the dam itself needs work. Even if we drain the water level down, that dam and that breachway still has to be worked on. It's a safety issue. It's an issue of, something that not only is it a mandate, but it's something that needs to be done as property owners. But it would be nice if we could create something that did generate revenue, that did something that gave back to to take some of the burden off of the ratepayers themselves, especially knowing it's not any longer part of our drinking water needs. It's just part of our water system. So to me, it makes sense, and I support it. And I think there's a number of things we can do, and the more people we include, the better proposal will come of it.
Thank you. So, Crystal, do you have enough information at this time to create a draft to come back to, our next meeting? 27th, or,
Maybe in 2 meetings, maybe.
or the first meeting in December?
I will say timing on getting you a draft for anything is going to be delayed. We're just short in the law department right now, so.
So if we go out 4 weeks, would that be enough, or would you?
Probably, and if you can give me somebody to work with from the council, that would be helpful. I can look at past committee. I'm sure it's not the first committee we've created, so there's got to be something out there, and we can work it that way. And if it works in 4 weeks, great. If we're not quite there, then it may just have to get pushed again. But
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to be compressing it too much. So, we can send it over to legal for recommendation, and we'll table it. It's your call, what you want to.
That's exactly what I want to do. I want to send it to legal for now, so we
Okay.
can draft the appropriate language. And within that language, we'll talk about, just a refresher, we'll talk about council appointees, we'll talk about mayoral appointee, we'll talk about, by virtue of their office, either conservation, I think Joe said park and rec, maybe waterworks, the planning board, certainly. But we're limiting this to Holyoke residents only. We also want to say that this committee should be charged with a few things. Certainly the background, what's the legal process to decommission a drinking water source? Beyond that, what's the vision that we want to see for this 5, 10, 15 years from now? And should the city of Holyoke or the Commonwealth be in a position to close this? What could we use it for? What are the potential uses that again are sensitive to the environment? And we put that specifically in the order just for that reason. It's an important jewel of the city, and we know that. So we're not looking to asphalt, the whole area. We're looking to see if there's some use that works in harmony with the sensitive area in which it rests. And then once we have that, we certainly want the committee to hear from other stakeholders, as Mike pointed out, DCR, the Boys and Girls Club, other abutters, as Joe pointed out. I think it's just vital. And then if it does make sense, and if it comes out the way I think it might, then the end game is to present it to the water commissioners for them to take a vote. And they're going to vote one way or the other. They're going to, whatever it is, they're the ones that have to present it to the general court.
Okay.
And if they do, so be it. If the water commissioners, in their wisdom, based upon all this information, whatever it is, if the water commissioners say no, then that's the vote. That'll be the ultimate vote.
Okay. Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. I really like the spirit of this order. I think that it's very timely that we start investigating what the future of the reservoir is. I'm just curious why we would need why the commission would need to be drafted in a legal form as opposed to, we've created ad hoc committees all the time through this body. It's just the will of the president. So why do we need the legal department to draft an organizational structure?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure, Rick, if you were.
Councilor Bartley, I think you addressed
I guess
that. You addressed it earlier. You might have been out of the room. I had asked that earlier, but.
Well, we did address it. It was my opinion, and Mike, we co-filed the order, that we've had other ad hoc committees created by either us or other branches of government. They're ephemera. They float out there and nothing happens with it. Put it into ordinance, make it real, make it part of the city government. And so once this goes in front of the waterworks, they'll know it's real. If it passes the waterworks and goes to Boston, they'll know it's real. It was created by city government. It's made up of Holyoke residents. They're going to know we're serious about it, as opposed to just some committee that, we, at a stroke of a pen. No, we put some thought into it as an ordinance committee and as a city council, and then as a community at whole. That's really the thinking behind that.
Okay. So I believe, did you make a motion that we send it to legal and table it? when did you want to table it to? You want to go to December 11th? And then, Crystal, if you're not ready, you can let the maker know, and
But I'll work
we
with
can
Crystal.
put it further
We'll work
into
together.
into the year if, if you need it.
Yep. So
All
moved.
right?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Should take up item number 4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, filed by Councilors Bartley and Bresnahan, ordered that the City Council amend its ordinances to create a committee to study the cost and benefits involved with the City of Holyoke establishing its own animal control facility. The expectation is that the committee, once created, will produce a report to be reviewed by the Board of Health, City Council, Mayor, and other relevant departments.
Yeah, I'm going to say just the exact same thing with the whole thing. Just, I'll work with Crystal. We'll put together, I left that kind of loose. But I'll work with Crystal on putting together, and we can set this for, I would say, the first meeting in January. That way we have 60 days or thereabouts to come up with a team that'll look into this. Because I need to do a little more homework on it, Madam Chair. But I think working with Crystal will spur me on to sort of get it done.
Councilor Roman?
Yes, I want to applaud Councilor Bartley and Bresnahan. I think I was away at that meeting, I would have signed on as a co-sponsor. This is a great order. I think that it's needed to have that conversation and exploration here in Holyoke. As someone who has stepped into a lot of animal issues in my ward, that's as far as I'll go on that. But I think that this is timely and appropriate, and I really look forward to seeing the outcome of this commission. So look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, the exact same thing, Madam Chair. Again, and this will be a much shorter timeline. But we've got a model out in Westfield, and I'm sure there are other models with whom we can. And then I'll be part of the fact gathering team, and we'll present it to the stakeholders, and they're going to say, Bartley, this is good, or Bartley, this sucks, and wrap it up, and we'll just stay with Tommy O'Connor. So.
Okay, so then do you want to make a motion on this?
The motion, we just refer it to legal to put it into draft language, and that legal come back with draft language for the first meeting in January.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. So this is tabled to January, but I will leave it in the hands of the maker relative to when it goes back on the agenda. Councilor
Copy that.
Bartley.
Yep. Copy that.
Motion to take up item number 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, filed by Councilor Lisi, that section 86-97 of the city's parking ordinance be struck from the city's parking ordinances. Section 86-97 is all-night parking. No person shall allow, permit, or suffer any vehicles registered in his name other than one acting in an emergency to be parked on any street in the downtown area between the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. of any day. Councilor Lisi?
Yeah, to me, I don't find this to be relevant any longer. Clearly, we're parking downtown. We're parking residential, and certainly overnight between the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. So if I understand the language correctly, I think it's outdated.
Okay, so, but would you want to say in residential areas? Because you wouldn't want to have people parking all over the city all night in the business districts, would you? I mean, is that your intention?
I mean, I don't feel that it's talking about the downtown area in the...
Well, like, say in front of City Hall and in the parking lot behind City Hall. I don't think we'd want cars parked all over there all night, would we? I mean, just as a practical matter.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think as the city continues to grow, we're going to wind up having parking all over the downtown overnight. If it's city property, then maybe we should say, like, no, overnight parking on city property, or like the library has that sign that says no overnight parking. The senior center has that sign that says no overnight parking. But I think, the downtown area is quite large, the way that we define the downtown today.
Right, in terms of especially the residential.
Yeah. And I just... Yeah. Again, if I understand the language here, I don't think that A, it's being enforced, and B, I don't think that we should be enforcing it because of the way that the city's changed.
So, Do you want Crystal to weigh in terms of modification of the language rather than like throwing it out completely, but modifying it to more meet the current needs, particularly relative to the residential parking and all those kinds of things? Or do you just simply want to?
I just think I mean, I would love to hear what other members have to say about this, because to me it just seems irrelevant and outdated. And if there's specific pieces of city property where we don't want people parking overnight, then I think that we can designate that with individual signs. But again, the downtown, and at least the way that downtown is being interpreted since I've been living in the city is quite broad. And there is a lot of residential living downtown these days, and I just don't see how we could eliminate the parking between those hours.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have? Councilor McGivern?
I respectfully hear what Councilor Lisi's saying. Just historically, parts of the downtown areas that are designated as no overnight parking are for the cleaning of the streets, typically where the meters are, is I think the way we used to define it. Snow removal when appropriate, being that, snow removal needs to take place on both sides of the street in downtown if businesses are to have some hope of opening the next day. And I recognize hers, and we've actually, by promoting our downtown zoning, by changing zoning where we promoted mixed use with residential, we have created, some issues of people who live downtown and need parking. Downtown is most of the apartments that existed were apartments that existed with people who didn't have cars, took the street railway, took the trolley system, walked to work, walked to whatever they were, wherever they needed to. Mm-hmm. And for people who do have cars, we did and still do allow, although it needs to be tweaked, the overnight parking in the parking deck onto White Street itself. And that's, I think I'm just giving an historical preference. I certainly needs to be looked at. But there's a lot, because the business area, some businesses are open to past midnight. So, we have to take that into consideration, what's going on there. Other businesses are open up very early in the morning, and residential cars would have to be moved at a certain period before the parking meters kicked in.
I'm okay with this. Just strike it. I mean, I don't know what.
I think it would be great to. I would propose tabling it for a meeting and asking Crystal for some legal counsel on if, like, the street sweeping and snow removal, is that addressed otherwise? Because again, I just feel that the language here is really broad. And if there's another way that we can make sure that there's access to street sweeping and snow removal, then maybe it is appropriate to strike this all together. But if those issues are not addressed, then maybe we need to modify it for winter months, and really limit the area from downtown to downtown business, or rather than maybe it's a certain set of streets that are around the.
Well, like Councilor McGivern said, some of the businesses open before 7, but the cars wouldn't be parked there all night. They'd be coming at 6.
Councilor McGivern, what's your opinion of just striking it? I mean, do you have a sense of whether or not we get at those snow removal and street sweeping?
Well, we get at snow removal, through our emergency ordinance itself. The problem with snow removal downtown is you need to do both sides, not just one side at a time. You need to do both sides as quickly as possible. It's one of the first areas outside of the hill areas that the snow plows hit regular. So that there are parking spots in the morning.
High Street to Maple Street? Is that what you would say?
Well, yeah, and Main Street has some similar needs too. We have 2 downtowns, which we're very lucky and legendary city to have two downtowns.
So strike it, are you saying strike it except for High, Dwight, and Main? For the overnight parking?
Hi, Dwight. I don't know, it's too, yeah, I think tabling it for now makes sense, but I think if we could create a box of sorts, right? So like High Street, between High and Main, and then between Lyman and Sargeant, something like that.
So it would get a little complicated, because then you'd have to create an ordinance, and then you'd have to create signage that would be exclusionary, because everything would be okay except no parking overnight here, here, and here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Sort of like the permit parking.
Well, I mean, we don't have any parking signage designating this no overnight parking in the downtown as it is.
No, because it all is.
It's really, I mean, and yet it's not being enforced clearly on a number of streets.
As are so many things.
Maybe there's a different way that we could designate this box. I mean, it would be interesting to look at it with the overlay zone, so maybe it is downtown business, and that covers enough of it, but I suspect that it's not just solely downtown business.
Yeah, that would probably be too easy.
So I'll table it for now and consult with Crystal and look at the ordinances that we have that are governing this.
So, as far as the order goes, you just want me to table it till you let me know you want it back? Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up item number 8.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Item 8, filed by Councilor Leahy, ordered that the city council be notified by department heads of all allegations of missing funds within 3 business days. This was an order that he filed that was responsive to a certain occurrence, and he wanted there to be an official standard so that we wouldn't be finding out, 3 months later about these kind of things. I think it's reasonable.
Motion to approve.
Is that a
But
second?
is it going into a legal form, or like where?
I don't know.
Where
I
would it
see
live?
Crystal raising her hand. Yes, Crystal?
I mean, I just have some thoughts. The odds that, you put this in and you say you need 3 days to notify us. What if you don't notice in 3 days and now they're already in violation of the ordinance? Or, things are happening in those 3 days trying to fix the situation and they're not getting to you. I just think this is a little bit open for some problems.
Would you suggest a better wording? I mean, we don't expect people to let us know of things they haven't discovered. I mean, that would be...
I mean, I don't really have any suggestions on it. I don't see this as being a great idea.
Why?
Because it just leaves other issues. There's no great way to word this. There's no great way to do this. I mean, the city just needs to function the way it functions, and I don't know that mandating that this kind of process happens is... I don't know that there's great wording or timelines or people or anything like that that's going to make it make sense.
Is it like a policies and procedures type of issue? Like, should we just ask the mayor to tell all department heads that this is like, the procedure that we're all going to be following from now on? Or like, can we direct the mayor?
We can't direct the mayor as a matter of day-to-day operations. I guess it sort of depends what the issue is, you know what I mean? I know Crystal wasn't here through all the things that have happened, but we had significant amounts of money gone out of the collector's office in years past, and nothing was done, so there was nothing that could happen once it was known to the council, because too much time had gone by, investigations hadn't happened, charges hadn't been brought. So I'm not going to speak for Councilor Leahy because he's not here, but I think this was out of interest relative to recouping the money in a situation where funds have gone missing. Well, and that the sooner the information is available, the more likelihood that there might be that opportunity. I mean, it's about transparency and disclosure and, you know, trying to preserve the finances of the city. Counselor McGivern?
I think, and I won't speak for, but I think you're correct. I won't speak for Councilor Leahy, but I think it's about transparency and about not knowing something for a lengthy period of time. I disagree with the 3 days, and I think the process has to be thought out just a little bit. I disagree with the 3 days because if there's a criminal investigation going on, it should be hands off. You know, that should come from the police department, the district attorney's department only, you know, when they're ready to announce the results of a criminal investigation. But when there's something that is missing or misappropriated or, you know, is obvious that it needs to come to our attention, I think it doesn't even have to be a department head. I think it should be both the city auditor who we appoint and the city treasurer who is elected, that they bring it to our attention in a timely fashion. And I don't know what the magical number is, but I think, you know, our next meeting or a 2-week period would certainly suffice, unless there's a criminal investigation that, you know, it's a hands-off situation.
I like that. So we could make it as so Crystal, we could make it as a policy relative to our appointment at least, right, with the auditor? That the auditor report to us. Any irregularities within, in a timely manner. I mean, to Crystal's point, you can't pick a magic number because it depends, right?
The auditor's position is meant to be independent. We know that over history doesn't always happen. And I'm not just talking about the temporary appointments of the mayor, but we've had auditors that have responded, appointed by the board, appointed by the city council, that have responded more so towards the mayor or has kept things under wrap. In a perfect world, that's the correct way to happen, that our auditor, the auditor who is independent, lets not just the city council, but lets the public know what's going on in a correct and timely fashion. We have an ordinance that I love, and just speaking to what Councilor Bartley said, is all department heads, when requested to appear before a city council subcommittee, must appear.
Yeah.
I got a hand here. I can give you five abusers just out of whatever. I'll stop there, Councilor Roman, you know, but that never appear before us when we request them. And, you know, it's shame on them because, you know, I get a lot of things, but the idea is transparency, to hear all sides of the story, so we know what's going on. But I think this, you know, the request here is correct. I think we just have to tweak it so it makes sense for everybody.
So as I've been listening to the different points of view, and to see what Crystal would think about this, to get to the spirit of it, if we put order that the city council be notified by the auditor of any financial irregularities in a timely manner, would probably get to it, right? But that assumes the auditor knows. The auditor doesn't always know. Remember last time?
Well, that's why I agree, not because of what happened. The city treasurer is an obvious department where a lot of money is, and a lot of, you know, things, you know, are not just money, but accounting, you know, accountability is funneled through that department along with the auditor. So I think both departments, you know, should be aware that there's a time you got to come to the city council.
The auditor would report to us in a timely manner. And like you say, if it's criminal, you can't, but if it's otherwise, you can. But that counts on the integrity of the person to do it. But I mean, that's true of anything, right? So do folks feel like that's more it's in the spirit and a more proper path than department heads, which is kind of operations mayor?
Yeah, and if I may kind of just piggyback on some of the comments that Councilor McGivern was making, there's probably not a lot of money being handled by most departments.
Right.
And so it's really just treasurer, collector, that
Collector too, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
But that's probably a good one.
And, you know, it's, in some ways, it's like, well, like to the point that you made about, well, would the auditor even know if money was missing from
The treasurer's
whatever
office.
department?
They wouldn't.
And I think that while in this most recent instance, the treasurer went to the mayor, there was no line of communication to the city council. And I think, you know, that's part of what's behind this
Right.
order as well.
Exactly.
And, yeah, so maybe it's treasurer, collector,
And auditor.
and auditor.
Yeah. So, but how do we craft this? Do we just make it as,
I mean, where's your enforcement on this? How do you intend on enforcing this regulation, this procedure?
Right thing to do. Why should we have to?
So then why are we creating it?
It's the right thing to do. Why should we have to tell people to do it? So we're setting a policy of what we expect to happen. That should happen without us saying it. And if they don't want to abide by it, fine.
well, right, and
Then sooner or later, they come in here asking us for something, and we'll show them enforcement.
Council Roman?
And to that point, Crystal, where's the enforcement on other ordinances that we pass, like, you know, like we were just talking about parking, anything else, enforcement? Speeding, like, we can say whatever we want, and if no one is gonna enforce it, that's fine, but at least we're creating a policy that helps us in the future, and to your point of just letting government operate in the short time I've been here, like, it's, that hasn't been the status quo, and I know in the past, when it comes to financial matters, we do have to at least set something on the books to say, hey, exactly that.
Exactly.
The city council's taking a stand. We want more transparency, we want more accountability. And with regards to enforcement, I could ask that about millions of legislation that we pass here, that we even try to get the executive or any department to enforce, not just one department. And if there's no enforcement, I mean, we can't really force anybody to enforce anything we pass. I get into that conversation a lot around safety or crime. And I heard, you know, to Councilor Bartley's point earlier of, or no, Councilor Sullivan, I apologize, point of, you know, you set up parking, resident-only parking, who's going to enforce if there's a illegal trafficker? You're absolutely right. The resident-only parking hasn't deterred those individuals, but because of, we're trying to work with who's going to enforce those rules. So I think that that's not necessarily a good argument for me to try to, like, not pass this. I think that it's a good place for us to start. And exactly like Councilor McGivern said, you come before us, you want a budget, you want something, hey, we didn't get that, we can enforce that. And I think where we have seen some cool accountability from this council, and this goes to other departments where we zero out their line items, they have to come back to us. We have to talk about those things. So there are mechanisms that the council, line item transfers is another good tool that the council was able to have some accountability and transparency. So, with all due respect, I would just offer that as the enforcement question we ask of millions of other legislation here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, does somebody want to make a motion on this? Councilor Lisi?
I'll make a motion. And I mean, I think the important word in this order is like the allegations. So, and maybe it's that, you know, they notify us through an executive session so that it's not made public until we as a body and consulting with other groups that we would then reach out to, having that information, could make a decision.
And if we added in irregularities, then it wouldn't just be an accusation. It would just be anything unusual and odd that we should know about. You know, I think if we make it a little...
I don't know if I want to make it too ambiguous, because then they're going to be coming here for everything. So I think if we could say, like, limit it to allegation fund, that the city council be notified by treasurer, collector, auditor on any allegations of missing funds
in a timely manner,
through an executive session or some sort of, I mean, what else could we use for like a confidential means of communication? That they request an executive session in order to disclose that information.
I mean, just like when we get together with the law department to be updated on any pending litigation.
So they make that request, right? Yeah.
They used to do it through the president. They can either do it in a special meeting or before the meeting, or a lot of ways you can do it.
Okay, so the motion is that we would establish a policy that the city council be notified by the collector, the auditor, and/or the treasurer of any allegations of missing funds in a timely manner in executive session. Is there a second on it? So Councilor Lisi made the motion, Councilor Roman seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that passes 4-0 to the city council.
Motion taken by item number 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 9, filed by Councilor McGee, order that the supervisors union please provide a list of all employees in the union and how long they've been part of the union. I'm not aware of a communication that has come in response to that order that was filed back in June.
Why is this here before us anyhow?
I don't know why. It was an odd thing in the jacket. I just want to help get rid of some of the stuff. I think maybe because some of the jobs are by ordinance and paid under ordinance, and I don't know.
Can we check in with Councilor McGee about whether it's in this city, in this committee properly, or if it's supposed to be somewhere else?
I double checked on the form, you know, when it got sent, that it was ordinance. He must have wanted it, I don't know. I don't know what his thinking was at the time, but I can ask Ryan to reach out to him to see if he got it. I mean, maybe he got it.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm just gonna write a note. So we can just table it and I'll ask Ryan to follow
Motion
up.
to
How's
table.
that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion taken by item number 10.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Filed by Councilor Roman, ordered that the City of Holyoke Personnel Department and its contractors review and make revisions to their current civil service processes and eliminate any barriers during an interview and application process that may preclude applicants with criminal records from gaining employment with the City of Holyoke and/or its contractors, giving exception to any employment having to deal with the elderly and the youth.
I think.
Now, we had taken this order up a number of times.
We were waiting for language.
Pardon?
We were waiting for language before, and we've had it emailed before, but I'm bringing it up again just in case.
Right, but I don't think we ever finished it. We had it, we tabled it, it's still been
get it
in
done.
process.
Let's get it done, I'm fine with that.
I think the general discussion was that we already did not have
Thank you.
anything that was prohibiting the the employment of city employees, but we didn't really have the reach to
Interesting.
impact all the contracts. But that's my general recollection. Yours is probably better.
Yes.
So, Councilor Roman.
No, you're right, Madam Chair, and this would, the full legal language is what we were waiting on to base off the first tweaks that we got back to Crystal and the team, and so this is the latest one updated as of 11/13. Sorry about that. But yeah, we have done some work on it for a while. We've heard from the community that they like this, and I know the general discussion from us was yes, even though, you know, this, you know, we have a brand new, amazing, you know, personnel department chair and head, but who's to say in the future if another personnel chair doesn't want to come in and add that box back, which is fine, but this clearly details, and I thank you, Crystal, for doing all the work on this, because I know we've been working on this. This was actually a refile of original one, so I know we've been working on this for a couple of years now, but it's really good, and the committee's been very thorough. We've been taking this up over and over again. I don't know where we are in the process, basically. So.
Well, I couldn't see that we had finished it.
Okay.
And so I wanted to bring it up because I personally, I have to say, I lost track of where we were with it. Sometimes I get a lot of versions. So, Crystal, is this the version that we've had for quite a long time, or is this new?
This is the version we've had. It's giving you 11/13 because I printed it for you today. But the last time we had it, this was pretty much completed. There was some discussion I had with Councilor Roman about Massachusetts actually has a law in the books that already bans the box, so to speak. So this is kind of redundant, but it gives us our own policy and it reiterates the state law. So it's mostly quarry related. This has been actually in the works for quite some time, so and there's nothing super updated since the last time you've seen it.
So it's consistent with what we've been doing as a city for the past year or two?
You've been required to anyways, correct.
Okay, all right, so can we complete this process?
Yeah, I say motion to approve the changes.
Second.
So I'm so willing to, sign on and adopt, but I just want to, can you point out any particular area that has been amended? Because we don't have a red line copy, so like what's being added? Is it the whole thing that's being added? Is it all new? Is it just specific sections?
So yeah, from the last conversation that we had as a body, that we edited based off the recommendation of my colleagues, was the fact that ours wouldn't prohibit the city from doing business with contractors. Because we couldn't enforce, and that was a consideration that my colleagues made that we accepted, to say in other cities and municipalities who have adopted stronger language, even in the states, they've said, no, we won't do business with contractors who don't follow this. Ours was tweaked to allow that to happen in case a contractor decides not to. It won't prohibit them from going after contracts and stuff like that, from what my understanding was last time. Correct, Crystal?
So just a quick correction. It has nothing to do with the city, municipality, anyone doing business with us. It's across the board. Employers in Massachusetts can't have this type of question. So
it's just good. It's just a reiteration and strengthening.
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, all right.
So this is documenting a policy in the city that is complying with the state.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Because that's been around for a while.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. This is yours from another one. I don't know.
Oh, thank you.
Motion to adjourn, I think.
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.